The tiny spaceship tumbled through Earth's atmosphere, its warning lights flashing red across the control panel. Lily gripped her seat tightly, her heart beating fast as she tried to control the failing engines. At just 8 inches tall, she looked even smaller in the pilot's chair, her silver uniform reflecting the emergency lights. Please work, she whispered to her ship's computer, pressing buttons with her tiny fingers. The trees below looked like giant spears ready to impale her ship. All she had wanted was to study Earth's plants from a safe distance. Now she was about to crash on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. The ship's database had been very clear about humans. They were enormous creatures who ate everything in their path. Ancient stories told of how they would catch smaller beings and keep them in cages for fun. Lily's people, the diminutives, had stayed away from Earth for thousands of years because of these stories. Smoke started coming from the control panel. Lily quickly put on her emergency pack, which looked like a tiny backpack but contained advanced survival gear. The ground was coming closer and closer. She saw a small clearing in the forest and aimed for it, using what little power she had left in the engines. The ship crashed through the tree branches, each hit making Lily bounce in her seat. Her safety straps dug into her shoulders, and she could hear parts of her ship breaking off. With a final loud crash, the ship hit the ground and slid through wet leaves and mud before stopping near a fallen tree. For a few minutes, Lily just sat there, breathing hard and checking if she was hurt. Her long blue hair had come loose from its neat bun, and her hands were shaking, but she was alive. The ship's door was stuck, so she had to kick it 3 times before it opened with a hiss. The forest around her was like nothing she had ever seen. Every plant was gigantic. Even the smallest flower was taller than her. The trees stretched up so high that she could barely see their tops. A simple leaf on the ground could be used as a bed. The air smelled different from her home world, rich with decay and growth, and something else she couldn't name. Lily pulled out her scanner and checked the area for any large animals or, worse, humans. The scanner showed no big creatures nearby, which made her relax a little. But she knew she couldn't stay relaxed for long. She needed to fix her ship and get off this planet before any humans found her. Looking at her ship, Lily wanted to cry. The main power core was damaged, and the outer shell was cracked in several places. She would need specific materials to fix it, and she would have to find them on this dangerous planet. The whole situation felt like a nightmare. A sudden sound made her jump and hide behind a mushroom. A bird landed nearby, and Lily had to cover her mouth to stop herself from screaming. The bird was bigger than the largest transport ship on her home world. Its beak alone was twice her size. The bird pecked at the ground a few times before flying away, but Lily stayed hidden, her heart racing. She needed a safe place to work on her ship. Using her scanner again, she found a hollow space under the fallen tree. It wasn't perfect, but it would hide her from large animals and rain. Lily spent the next hour using her strength enhancer suit to drag parts of her ship under cover. Just as she was moving the last piece, her scanner started beeping. Something big was moving in her direction. Lily quickly checked the readings and felt her blood freeze. The shape was unmistakable. It was walking on 2 legs and was over 70 times her size. A human was coming. Lily rushed to hide her ship's parts better, covering them with leaves and sticks. She then squeezed herself into a tiny space between 2 tree roots, making herself as small as possible. Her scanner kept beeping softly, showing the human getting closer and closer. Through a small gap, she could see huge boots stepping through the forest. Each step made the ground shake slightly. Lily held her breath, remembering all the terrible stories about humans catching little creatures like her. She had to stay hidden. She had to survive. She had to find a way off this planet before she ended up as someone's lunch or, worse, a pet in a cage. The boots stopped moving. They were right next to her hiding spot. And then, to her horror, she heard a voice from above that seemed to shake the very air. "Well, What do we have here? Lily pressed herself further into the small space between the tree roots as the human bent down. His face appeared in front of her hiding spot. A giant face with kind-looking eyes behind glass squares that sat on his nose. He was holding a black box with a round glass eye on it, which he had been pointing at different things in the forest. The human's eyes grew wide as he spotted the pieces of her ship that weren't completely hidden by leaves. His huge hand reached out and picked up a shiny piece of metal that had broken off during the crash. Lily watched in horror as he turned it over in his fingers, studying it carefully. "This isn't from Earth," he said softly, but to Lily's tiny ears, it still sounded like thunder. She watched as he pulled out a small glowing rectangle from his pocket and started tapping on it with his finger. The human was probably calling others to come help him hunt for her. Lily knew she had to do something. Without her ship parts, she would never get home. Taking a deep breath, she activated her suit's strength enhancer and prepared to run. Maybe she could grab one piece while he was distracted and hide it somewhere else. But just as she was about to move, the human did something unexpected. He gently placed the ship piece back down and took a step back. Then he pulled something from his bag and placed it near the crash site. Lily's scanner identified it as some kind of earth food wrapped in a clear material. Next to it, he put down some tools and what looked like building materials. Her heart started beating even faster. According to the old stories, this was exactly what humans did. They left food to lure small creatures and materials to build cages for them. The human stepped back again and lifted his black box to his face. It made clicking sounds as he pointed it at her ship parts. He was documenting everything. Soon all the humans would know about her crash site. Lily felt tears forming in her eyes. She was going to end up in a human zoo, or worse, as a snack for this giant. For the next hour, the human walked around the area, sometimes placing more items near her ship parts. He put down water in a small clear container, more food items, and even some soft-looking material that could be used as a bed. Each new item made Lily more nervous. The human was clearly setting up a trap, making a comfortable space to keep her in. Finally, the human spoke again, this time in a very quiet voice that was clearly meant to be gentle but still made Lily's bones vibrate. "I know you must be scared," he said to the air around him, "but I want to help. I'm Tom. I'm leaving these things for you to use if you want them. I'll come back tomorrow with more supplies." Then he did something truly shocking. He took several steps backward, turned around, and walked away. Lily's scanner showed him moving further and further from the crash site until he was completely gone. She waited another 30 minutes before daring to leave her hiding spot. Looking at all the items the human, Tom, had left, Lily felt confused. The food didn't look like a trap. Her scanner showed it was safe to eat, and some of it smelled wonderful. The tools he left were exactly the kind she needed to start fixing her ship. How did he know? As she examined everything, she found a piece of paper with drawings on it. Tom had sketched her ship parts and drawn pictures showing how they might fit together. He had even drawn a tiny figure next to them, showing that he knew exactly how small she was. But instead of drawing the figure in a cage or being eaten, he had drawn it working with tools to fix the ship. Lily sat down on a leaf and tried to think. Everything she knew about humans said they were dangerous monsters, but everything Tom had done went against those stories. He had been careful not to scare her, left helpful items, and then walked away instead of trying to catch her. As the sun started to set, Lily made a small shelter using the materials Tom had left. She tried some of the food. It was delicious. That night, as she lay on the soft material looking up at the stars through the trees, she couldn't help wondering, had her people been wrong about humans all this time? Or was this all part of a bigger trap? Tomorrow, Tom would return, and she would have to decide whether to trust him or run away. The next morning, Lily woke up to the sound of her scanner beeping. Tom was coming back, just as he had promised. She quickly hid inside her shelter, peeking out through a small gap in the materials. This time, He was carrying even more things in his arms. Tom placed a tiny house-like structure near her shelter. It was made of wood and had small rooms inside that were just the right size for her. Lily's heart sank. This was definitely a cage, even if it was a pretty one. He had spent all night building it to keep her in. Next, Tom took out more food. This time, he had brought tiny pieces of different earth foods, all cut to be the perfect size for her to eat. He arranged them carefully on a small plate and placed it near the house. Lily's scanner showed that some of the food had extra nutrients in it, clearly meant to fatten her up. While Tom worked, he talked softly, telling her about himself. He explained that he was a photographer who took pictures of small things in nature. He lived alone in a cabin nearby and promised he hadn't told anyone about finding her. But Lily remembered the glowing rectangle he had used yesterday. Surely he had already sent pictures to other humans. Tom pulled out his camera, the black box with the glass eye, and started taking more pictures of her ship parts. He had moved them into a better order, almost like he was trying to help fix them. But Lily knew better. He was just documenting his discovery, probably for some human science group that would want to study her. After a while, Tom sat down on the ground, making himself smaller, though he was still enormously tall to Lily. He took out a notebook and started drawing. Lily watched as he sketched more pictures, this time showing different ways her ship might have looked before it crashed. Some of his guesses were surprisingly close to the truth. Then he did something unexpected. He placed the notebook on the ground, opened to his drawings, and pushed it closer to her hiding spot with one finger. Next to it, he put a tiny pencil that looked like it came from something called a golf set. "If my drawings are wrong, you can fix them," he said quietly. "I want to help you rebuild your ship, but I need to understand how it works first." Lily felt torn. The offer was tempting. Tom's drawings were good, but had some important mistakes. With a few small changes, they could be perfect blueprints for fixing her ship. But going out to draw on his notebook would mean showing herself to him. As she watched, Tom took out his lunch and started eating a sandwich. Lily noticed something important. He hadn't tried to catch any small forest creatures to eat. In fact, she had been watching him for 2 days now, and he hadn't tried to eat anything that was alive. Maybe the stories about humans eating smaller beings weren't true. Taking a deep breath, Lily made a decision. She activated her suit's camouflage mode, which made her almost invisible, and crept out to look at the notebook more closely. His drawings were detailed and careful. He had even added notes about which materials might work best for repairs. While she was studying the drawings, Tom remained perfectly still, pretending not to notice her. He kept eating his sandwich and looking at the trees, though Lily was sure he could see her shimmer in the air when she moved. Very carefully, Lily picked up the tiny pencil. It was almost like a log in her hands, but she could use it. She started marking small corrections on his drawings, showing the proper shape of her ship's power core. She heard Tom's breath catch with excitement, but he still didn't move. For the next hour, they worked like this, Lily making corrections and adding notes to his drawings while staying mostly invisible, and Tom sitting quietly, only moving to turn to a new page in his notebook when she needed one. It was strange, but it felt almost peaceful. As the sun began to set, Tom spoke again. "Thank you for trusting me a little bit. I'll bring better materials tomorrow, ones that match your drawings. And," he paused, reaching into his bag, "I brought you something else." He pulled out a tiny communication tablet, sized perfectly for her hands. "This way, you can tell me what you need without having to show yourself until you're ready." Lily looked at the tablet after Tom left. It was a simple Earth device, but he had modified it to work for someone her size. Maybe, just maybe, this human was different from the monsters in her people's stories. But she still couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to be careful. After all, even the prettiest cage was still a cage. Dark clouds rolled across the sky as Lily worked on her ship's repairs. She had been using the tools and materials Tom brought, making slow but steady progress. The tiny tablet he had given her sat nearby, filled with messages they had exchanged over the past few days. She still hadn't shown herself properly to him, but they had developed a way of working together. The first drops of rain began to fall, bigger than any raindrops Lily had ever seen. Each one was almost the size of her head. She quickly gathered her tools and ran to her shelter, but something felt wrong. Her scanner was showing dangerous weather patterns approaching. This wasn't just rain. Wind began to howl through the trees, making them bend and creak. Lily's shelter, made from the materials Tom had brought, started to shake. She tried to hold it together, but the wind was too strong. A powerful gust ripped through the clearing, tearing her shelter apart and sending her tumbling across the ground. Lily screamed as she was thrown through the air, her tiny body helpless against the storm's power. She managed to grab onto a root, holding on with all her strength. Rain poured down now, so heavy she could barely see. Her ship parts were being scattered by the wind, and her food supplies had already blown away. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by thunder so loud it made her ears ring. In the bright flash, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A huge branch was falling right toward her hiding spot. She let go of the root and rolled away just in time. But now she had nothing to hold on to. The wind picked her up again, throwing her against a tree trunk. Even with her suit's protection, the impact hurt. She was soaked, cold, and terrified. Her scanner was beeping wildly, warning her that her body temperature was dropping to dangerous levels. She needed to find shelter fast, or she wouldn't survive. Through the rain and wind, she heard a familiar voice calling out. Tom was there, wearing a bright yellow raincoat, his light beam cutting through the darkness. He was looking for her. Lily's heart raced as she considered her options: stay here and freeze, or trust the human. Another lightning flash lit up the sky, and she saw Tom clearly. He was carefully picking up her scattered ship parts, storing them in a waterproof container. He was trying to save her work. In that moment, Lily made her decision. Using the last of her strength, she pressed the emergency button on her tablet. Tom's tablet buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, squinting through the rain to read her message. Help, by the big oak tree. Freezing. He moved quickly but carefully toward her location, his light beam searching the ground. When he found her, Lily was curled up against the tree trunk, shivering violently. Tom gasped when he saw her clearly for the first time, but he didn't hesitate. He gently scooped her up in his huge hands, cupping them to protect her from the wind and rain. Lily felt the warmth of his hands around her, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid of being held by a human. She could feel his hands trembling slightly. He was being so careful not to hurt her. Tom quickly unzipped his coat pocket and spoke softly. I'm putting you in here to keep you warm. Hold on tight. We're going to my cabin. The pocket was warm and dry. Lily held onto the soft fabric as Tom walked quickly through the storm. She could feel his steady heartbeat and the careful way he moved to avoid jostling her. After what seemed like forever, she heard a door open and close, and the sound of the storm became muffled. Warm air surrounded them as Tom carefully unzipped his pocket. You're safe now, he said softly. I promise. He held his hands out, letting Lily climb onto them when she was ready. She looked around and saw they were in a cozy room with a crackling fireplace. In one corner stood what looked like a beautiful dollhouse, with real tiny furniture and warm lights glowing from its windows. I made this for you, Tom explained, just in case you ever needed it. It has heating, running water, and everything you might need. It's not a cage. The doors and windows all open. You can leave whenever you want. But please at least stay until the storm passes. Looking up at Tom's worried face, Lily realized something important. She had been so wrong about humans, or at least about this human. The morning light streamed through the dollhouse windows as Lily woke up in the softest bed she had ever slept in. She could smell something wonderful coming from the main house. Tom was making breakfast. Over the past week, she had learned that he loved to cook, and he always made extra food in tiny portions for her. Today was different, though. Today, Lily had decided to show Tom something from her world. She took out her botanical research kit, which had survived the crash thanks to its protective case. Inside were seeds from her home planet, seeds that could grow into plants with amazing healing powers. Walking out of the dollhouse, Lily saw Tom sitting at his work table. He was fixing her ship's power core using the instructions she had drawn for him. His huge hands moved with surprising gentleness as he connected the tiny wires. When he noticed her, he smiled but kept working, letting her approach at her own pace. "Tom," she called out, her voice steady now that she wasn't afraid anymore. "I want to show you something." She pointed to his greenhouse, which she could see through the window. Tom's eyes lit up with interest. He had noticed her looking at his plants before, but had never pushed her to talk about them. He offered his open palm, and Lily stepped onto it without hesitation. The fear she had felt just a week ago seemed silly now. Tom had proven himself to be gentle and kind, nothing like the monsters in her people's stories. He carried her carefully to the greenhouse, listening as she explained about her work as a botanist. Inside the greenhouse, Lily directed Tom to prepare a special growing space. She showed him how to mix the soil just right, using her scanner to check its composition. Then, with great care, she planted one of her special seeds. Tom watched in amazement as she used a tiny device to make the seed grow quickly. Within minutes, a beautiful plant sprouted from the soil. Its leaves shimmered with rainbow colors, and its flowers gave off a soft glow. Tom gasped in wonder, but he didn't touch it until Lily said it was okay. She explained how the plant could heal injuries and cure certain illnesses. "This is incredible," Tom said softly, taking pictures of the plant with his camera. "Think of how many people this could help." But then he did something that surprised Lily. He asked her if she wanted to share this knowledge, or if it should remain a secret. He was letting her choose. Lily felt warm inside. Tom understood something important without her having to explain it, that her people's technology and knowledge needed to be shared carefully. They spent the rest of the morning with Lily teaching Tom about her people's plants, and Tom showing her how Earth plants were different. They set up a special section in the greenhouse where they could grow both Earth and diminutive plants together. Tom built tiny walkways at Lily's height so she could tend to the plants easily. He even modified some of his gardening tools to work for her size. Using the tablet, Lily began recording their research together. She documented how Earth soil affected her plants, while Tom took beautiful photographs of the results. They discovered that some of their plants could be crossbred, creating new species with amazing properties. As they worked, Lily told Tom more about her world, and he shared stories about Earth. She learned that humans had their own fears and myths about tiny people, but most humans nowadays dreamed of meeting other intelligent life in the universe. Tom explained how humans had grown past many of their old fears in violent ways. That evening, as they sat together near the fireplace, Lily on a tiny couch Tom had made specially for her, and Tom in his big armchair, they watched the storm still raging outside. But now, the storm didn't scare Lily anymore. She felt safe here, working with her human friend. "Tomorrow," she said, looking up at Tom, "I want to send a message to my people. They need to know the truth about humans. At least about some humans." Tom smiled and nodded, understanding the trust she was showing in him. Neither of them knew it yet, but their simple friendship was about to change both their worlds forever. The peaceful morning in the greenhouse was interrupted by a loud beeping from Lily's emergency beacon. She nearly dropped the tiny watering can she was holding. Her scanner showed what she had both hoped for and now, surprisingly, dreaded. A diminutive rescue ship was approaching Earth. Tom saw her expression change and knelt down next to her walkway. "Your people are coming, aren't they?" he asked softly. Lily nodded, her heart beating fast. She knew the rescue team would be following standard protocol for a hostile planet. They would come armed, ready to fight the dangerous humans they had been warned about. "We need to prepare," Lily said, rushing to the tablet. She quickly typed out everything they would need to do. Tom read her notes and immediately started moving plants from their joint experiments into a safe place. They had discovered so many amazing things together. New hybrid plants that could clean water, flowers that could power small devices, and seeds that could grow in any soil. The scanner beeped again. The rescue ship would arrive in less than an hour. Lily ran to her dollhouse and put on her formal uniform, the one that showed her rank as a senior botanist. She had to look official for this meeting. Tom changed into clean clothes too, understanding the importance of first impressions. Just as they finished preparing, a silver light appeared in the greenhouse. 3 diminutive officers materialized, wearing battle suits and holding defensive weapons. They gasped when they saw Tom, immediately raising their force shields. "Step away from our citizen," the lead officer shouted at Tom. His voice was amplified by his suit, but to Tom it still sounded tiny. Tom very slowly raised his hands to show he meant no harm and took one step back. "Wait." Lily moved to stand between Tom and her people. "Commander Reed, please lower your weapons. This human is my friend. He saved my life and has been helping me with my research." The rescue team looked confused. Commander Reed checked his scanner several times, not believing what he was seeing. "Dr. Lily, our readings show you are unharmed, but surely this is some trick. The human must have forced you to say these things." Lily shook her head firmly. "Look around you, Commander. Look at what we've built here." She gestured to the greenhouse, where earth and diminutive plants grew side by side. The rescue team slowly lowered their shields as they took in the sight of the tiny walkways, the carefully modified tools, and the beautiful hybrid plants. "But the stories. All our records say humans are dangerous monsters who eat smaller beings," another officer said, still keeping his distance from Tom. "Those stories are wrong," Lily said. She walked over to Tom's hand, which was resting on the ground, and climbed onto it without hesitation. The rescue team gasped again. Tom gently lifted her up so she was at eye level with her people, who were still standing on their ship's hover platform. "Tom has shown me that humans have grown far beyond their primitive past. They are capable of great gentleness and wisdom. Look at these research notes." Lily held up her tablet, showing the careful documentation she and Tom had created together. Commander Reed moved closer, his scientific curiosity overtaking his fear. He studied the notes, his eyes growing wider as he understood the implications of what Lily and Tom had discovered together. The hybrid plants they had created could solve many problems on both their worlds. "This is remarkable," the commander admitted. He looked up at Tom with new respect. "You helped our scientist continue her work, even after she crashed on your planet." Tom smiled gently. "Lily taught me so much about your world's plants. I just provided the space and tools she needed. We learned from each other." The third officer, who hadn't spoken yet, suddenly laughed. "Do you realize what this means? We've spent generations avoiding Earth because of our fears, missing out on all this potential for cooperation and discovery." Lily felt hope growing in her heart. "Commander," she said formally, "I request permission to stay and continue my research here." And she took a deep breath. "I would like to propose establishing official diplomatic relations with Earth, starting with scientific cooperation." The rescue team members looked at each other, then back at the thriving greenhouse where 2 worlds' plants grew together in harmony. Commander Reed smiled and pulled out his official tablet. "Dr. Lily," he said, "I think it's time to write a new chapter in our people's history books." 3 months had passed since the rescue team's arrival, and Tom's greenhouse had grown into something extraordinary. What was once a simple garden was now the first official Earth diminutive research station. The small building was filled with amazing plants from both worlds, tended to by scientists of both species working side by side. Lily stood on her elevated platform, checking the growth of their newest hybrid plant. Below her, Tom was carefully photographing the changes in its rainbow-colored leaves. They had become quite famous in both their worlds. The tiny alien botanist and the human photographer who had broken down centuries of fear with nothing but kindness and plants. The diplomatic team is arriving today. Lily called down to Tom, trying to keep her voice steady despite her excitement. This wasn't just any diplomatic visit. Today, the leaders of her world would meet with human scientists for the first time. Tom's photographs and their research notes had convinced both sides that it was time for official contact. The greenhouse door opened, and a group of humans in formal suits walked in, followed by several floating platforms carrying diminutive officials. Lily smiled as she saw the humans' faces fill with wonder. No matter how many times people visited, that first moment of seeing tiny people and giant humans working together always caused amazement. "Welcome to the Bridge Garden," Lily said, her voice now amplified by the special system they had installed. She gestured to the incredible plants around them. "Here, you can see what happens when two worlds stop fearing each other and start working together." Tom stepped forward, holding up his camera. "These photographs show our progress over the past 3 months," he said, as pictures appeared on the large screen they had mounted on the wall. "Each image tells the story of how we learn to combine our knowledge and overcome our differences." The visitors moved through the greenhouse, examining the remarkable achievements. There were plants that could clean polluted water in hours, flowers that could power small devices with clean energy, and trees that could grow food even in the harshest conditions. But more impressive than the plants was the sight of humans and diminutives working together, each bringing their unique perspectives and abilities to solve problems. "To think," one of the diminutive leaders said, shaking his head in amazement, "all these years we stayed away from Earth because we thought humans would eat us. And now, look at this. They're building tiny tools just to help us work better." A human scientist laughed softly. "And we had stories about tiny people stealing children in the night. How foolish our fears seem now." She gestured to a young human girl who was carefully helping a diminutive child plant seeds in a special teaching area they had built. "Now our children are learning from each other." Lily felt her heart warm as she watched the visitors realize what she had learned months ago, that friendship could grow in the most unexpected places. She remembered how terrified she had been when she first crashed, how sure she was that Tom would eat her or keep her in a cage. Now she couldn't imagine her life without her giant human friend. The diplomatic team moved to the conference area, where tiny hovering chairs let the diminutives sit at eye level with the humans. They began discussing plans for more research stations, student exchange programs, and trading of scientific knowledge. But Lily and Tom stayed in the greenhouse, tending to their plants. "Did you ever think," Tom asked as he adjusted a tiny irrigation system, "that your crash landing would lead to all this?" Lily looked around at their garden, at the place where two worlds had finally come together. Through the windows, she could see reporters from both species taking pictures of the historic meeting. Soon, everyone would know that the old stories of fear were just that, stories. "No," she answered honestly. "I thought I was going to end up as someone's snack. Instead, I found a friend who showed me that sometimes the scariest things in life can turn out to be the most wonderful." Tom smiled and carefully offered his hand. Lily stepped onto it without hesitation, and he lifted her up to check on a high-growing plant. They worked in comfortable silence, the tiny botanist and her human friend, while behind them two worlds began writing a new story together, one without fear, filled instead with friendship, discovery, and hope. Outside, the sun set on another busy day at the Bridge Garden, its light shining through leaves from two different worlds growing together in perfect harmony.